I'm going to be really upfront and honest with you all. This is the first Souls-like game that actually got me close to throwing in the towel and wanting to give up. But just then, just when I thought I was done, something clicked, and I began to understand what was expected of me. I persevered through every setback and every death to finally defeat the boss at the end of the demo, and while I do have a few problems with the game, I ended up really enjoying it overall. It really challenged me to learn and to adapt, which I was able to do by the end. But much like a soldier, I had to be broken down in order to be built back stronger. The combat relies heavily on deflections and fast reactions, which, as most of you know, is something that I struggle with in Souls-likes. I think the developers are on the verge of making the game slightly too difficult, but they are taking feedback, which is great to see. One quick thing I do want to mention is that the demo is only available until the 25th of September 2022, so if you do want to try it out, please do so, because there isn't much time left. Okay, so let's talk about the demo, and I guess as usual, I'll start by explaining what it is. Wolong Fallen Dynasty is a Souls-like game set in a fantasy version of ancient China, and it's developed by Team Ninja. If this is looking or sounding familiar to you, then it's probably because Team Ninja are responsible for the Nioh games, which were, themselves, Souls-likes but with a few new ideas. The Nioh games were set in a fantasy version of feudal Japan and had you facing off against well-known historical figures such as Sanada Yukimura, Oda Nobunaga, and Date Masamune. Wolong, on the other hand, is set in an obviously fictional version of the Three Kingdoms era of China. This means you'll likely be battling historical warriors such as Guan Yu, Cao Cao, and of course the mighty Lu Bu. Any fan of the Musou or Warriors genre will know exactly what I'm talking about here. I've personally started referring to Nioh and Wolong as Samurai Souls and Dynasty Souls respectively. As a player who loved and was able to beat both Nioh games plus has hundreds of hours in them, I can definitely feel the Nioh DNA coursing through Wolong's veins. That said, it's a very, very different beast, although the casual observer probably couldn't tell. I will admit it does look quite similar, but I assure you that it's closer to Sekiro than it is to Nioh, much to my dismay. The demo starts you off with a character creator, which I didn't spend too much time in as you're very quickly covered up in body armor and headwear. It does seem rather in-depth though, which is nice to see for the people that enjoy that kind of thing. I don't tend to do much in character creators other than alter the hairstyle, but it's got a load of options which should keep everyone reasonably happy. At the end of the character creation process, you'll be asked to pick a phase, which is essentially your starting class. However, it doesn't lock you into anything and can be changed up later. There are 5 phases to choose from and they all represent a different playstyle. Fire phase is attack-based, earth is defense-based, wood focuses on support, metal uses debuffs, and water revolves around stealth. Whichever one you choose determines your starting stats, gear, spells, and the divine beast that you get, but as I said, it can all be changed later on. Once you've made your selection, you're asked if you'd like to play the tutorial, which I do highly recommend. Reason being is that if you play this like a Souls game or a Nioh game, you're going to get obliterated. Trust me on that, I know. The first thing you'll notice is the ability to place a flag in a pedestal. These are your bonfires, shrines, beacons, or checkpoints, whichever name you want to use. In this game they're referred to as battle flags and they serve a purpose other than being used for checkpoints where you can rest and level up. Each level in the game will have a certain number of large battle flags to discover, as well as some smaller ones which can't be rested at but do provide a benefit. You can actually see the count of the flags that you've found located at the top right of the screen. Each flag that you raise within the level increases your fortitude, and your fortitude is a number that your morale cannot fall below. So what's morale then? Well, morale is the number above your health bar in the center of the screen, and it increases as you kill more enemies and progress through the level. The more morale you have, the stronger you temporarily become, although there will be a cap on morale in each level. For the demo, it's 20. If you happen to die, and you will, your morale number falls, making you weaker, but your morale can't fall below your fortitude. So the idea behind this mechanic is to explore the level, raise the flags, and increase your fortitude. By the time I fought the boss, I had a fortitude of 20 and the cap for morale is 20. This means that no matter how many times I die, my morale cannot be lowered and I can't be weakened. You'll also see some enemies that have a morale number attached to their HP bar, which gives you an indication of their strength. If you were to start the game up at morale 0 and run past all of the enemies to fight a mini-boss who's at morale 20, you're gonna have a bad time. I'm sure that it can and will be done by some skilled players, but in general, it's used to help guide you in the right direction. At first, it really seemed like a pointless system to me, but after putting over 5 hours into the demo, I kinda get what they're going for here. I wouldn't say it adds a whole lot to the game, but I do understand it, and after a while I came to appreciate it as a secondary form of progression. It's worth noting that you can fast travel between the battle flags in the full game, but in the demo this feature has been disabled. The other major gameplay element that should be mentioned is the spirit gauge system. This game does not utilize a stamina bar unlike most other games within this genre. It's much more in line with Sekiro or more recently Thymesia. The spirit gauge is sort of like a push and pull or perhaps risk and reward type system. Underneath your green health bar you'll see a bar that's either empty, orange or blue. The bar is usually empty when nothing's going on, but once you get into combat it will move left for orange and right for blue. As the player, you want to be in the blue side of the gauge as much as humanly possible. The further into the blue side you are, the more damage you deal and the more advantage you gain. Falling into the orange side tells you that you're not doing very well, you'll deal less damage, and if you're hit while the orange side is full, you'll be left staggered and helpless. Many things can cause your bar to edge into the orange section, including blocking, dodging, using spells, using martial arts, being hit, and missing deflections. Progressing into the blue side of the gauge requires you to land hits on the enemy and time your deflections perfectly. This promotes aggressive play and encourages you to keep the pressure on your enemies, and that's important. All enemies have the same spirit gauge as you and can be staggered if you drop them far enough into the orange side. Not to mention the fact that if you're in the blue and they're in the orange, you'll be hitting harder and they'll be hitting weaker. I think on paper it's a very elegant system, but in practice it feels a little bit off in how it's tuned. You can wail on an enemy, for example, that will block every single hit and their gauge will barely move. Sometimes it felt like I only had to look at an enemy for my character to stagger. Now of course I'm exaggerating here, but you get what I mean. I can only imagine it's done this way to stop you steamrolling everything, due to the fact that you can attack constantly without worrying about stamina. Still though, it did definitely feel a bit unfair at times in regards to one rule for the enemies and one rule for the player. There is quite a while to go before launch, so I imagine they'll take the feedback and fine-tune things before then. To be fair, that's literally true for everything that I'm saying, so do take my complaints with a grain of salt. So now we come to the part that I personally struggle with, and that's deflections. As I said in my Thymesia review, I'm generally pretty good at blocking and parrying in Souls games. However, I have a really hard time with deflecting attacks in games like Sekiro, Thymesia, and now Wo Long. I'm much better at dodging and using iframes to get the upper hand, but in games like the ones I just listed, it's not really an option. You literally have to get up in an enemy's face and learn to deflect their attacks. I feel like it's all but required after playing through the demo. I've tried to go back and examine my gameplay and really think as to why I struggle with it. At 34 years old, I might not have the reaction speed of someone in their late teens or early 20s, but I still consider myself to be pretty much on the ball when it comes to most games. I don't struggle with Souls games at all anymore, and I didn't struggle with Nioh. Wo Long though is a different story entirely. After careful consideration, I believe my issue stems from fighting against my own instincts and muscle memory. And that makes sense. I've played and beaten a lot of Souls and Souls-like games, but comparatively, Sekiro-like games have eluded me. A lot of the enemies in the game have very quick wind-ups on their attack animations, and the game really doesn't want you to block. You're actively punished for it, in fact. Thing is though, my instinct is to hold down the guard button and absorb the incoming attack, which should make the enemy stop attacking me. That's not what happens though. If an enemy attack has 5 hits in its combo, you need to deflect all 5 hits and then counterattack. Unlike in Elden Ring, where if the enemy hits your shield, they usually bounce off of it. It's a difficult thing to wrap my head around sometimes, but I think I was able to do it by the end. I ended up beating the demo twice, with the first playthrough taking 3 to 4 hours and the second taking less than 1 hour. So I think it's safe to say that I did improve my skills, and let me tell you, deflection was the key to beating the main boss. I would personally like to see them increase the window on the deflections by a small amount, because if you aren't able to hit them consistently, you are going to die every single time. And I hear people saying, well, learn to do it consistently then, and you're absolutely right. I will, over time, learn to do it consistently, but even so, I feel like the window is just a little bit too small. I don't want the game to hold my hand or be easy, I just want it to feel a tiny bit fairer, that's all. So what can you do in terms of offense? Well, firstly you have 2 different types of special abilities, which are spells and martial arts. Spells are elemental abilities, which for my character were things like fireballs and being able to coat your weapon in fire for extra damage. Some spells are quite powerful and as such will only be active when you reach a certain morale threshold. If a spell needs you to be at 14 morale and you're at 10, you simply can't cast it. You're able to choose and equip up to 4 of these spells at a time, and you can cast them by holding down the right trigger and pressing the corresponding face button. Martial arts are similar to spells, but they're reliant on the weapon that you have equipped. Each weapon in the game has a chance to drop with a certain martial art tied to it, which you can use by holding down R1 and pressing the appropriate face button. Martial arts that roll on swords won't be present on glaives, martial arts that roll on glaives won't be present on curved swords, and so on. Keep in mind that using most of the game's spells and martial arts will tank your spirit gauge, often putting you straight into the orange. This is especially obvious if you open the fight with one of these abilities, so it's probably best to start a battle with an enemy, build up the blue side of your spirit gauge, and then use your spells or martial arts when needed. The game world is surprisingly vertical in its design, allowing you to scale the chalk-covered walls with quick double jumps and strike the enemy from above. You can perform critical attacks from above as well as behind or once you've broken an enemy's spirit gauge. It seems like you can actually build a stealth-based character, and I would love to see how a really skilled player would implement that in practice. You can also find a wide variety of armor and clothes that all have a ton of different stats and bonuses to consider. I'm actually using the yellow turban gear in the video, which would be very well known amongst Dynasty Warriors fans. Equip load and character weight is a thing in this game, so wearing super heavy gear will in fact slow you down. Your ranged options, at least as far as the demo goes, are bows and crossbows, but the ammo for them is rather limited. They're useful for sniping enemies that are out of reach or gaining the aggro of a single enemy, which is known as pulling. There wasn't really many consumable items in the game or any accessories at all that I could find, but there is a few consumables that give you genuine chi, which is this game's version of souls, blood echoes, or runes. You can of course take the genuine chi that you've earned and spend it at the battle flags to level up one of 5 virtues. These virtues represent different stat increases for your character, and the system will likely be familiar to most players of these kind of games. One small difference in Wo Long is that when you die, you won't drop all of your genuine chi. You'll only drop half of it, but as usual, you can recover it by killing the enemy that killed you. However, if you fail to do so, it'll be halved again, and so on. This probably goes without saying, but you do indeed have a healing flask with limited uses that refills when you rest at a battle flag. In this game, the flasks are called Dragon Cure Pots, and you can use them by pressing up on the D-pad. I have heard that some people were having issues with the healing button being consistently unresponsive, but in my experience, I think that only happened maybe a couple of times. Still, it is something to be aware of. I actually don't have many thoughts on the visuals. I think it looks fine enough. I mean, the environments look fine, the character models look fine, and the gear looks fine. Not mind-blowing, but, you know, decent. I think the highlight of the demo in terms of visuals is probably the monster designs. Not just in this demo, but in the official trailers as well. There's some very cool stuff to be seen and to be fought, so I'm looking forward to seeing and experiencing more of it in the full game. I was playing this on PS5 using the prioritized frame rate mode, which gave me a good 60 FPS most of the time. There were definitely some noticeable frame drops and some slowdown at various locations in the game, but it wasn't exactly constant. So I do believe this will be ironed out before launch. I would categorize its performance issues as relatively minor at this point in time. And lastly, I was actually able to test co-op with a friend. When resting at a battle flag, you can set up a co-op room, join random players, set a password, or invite friends directly. I have to be honest and say that we both found it to be a rather miserable experience. Both of our internet connections were fine, but the server seemed to have a lot of issues keeping us synced together. It created a really uneven gameplay session where the enemies skated across the floor, hit us without being near us, and in general everything just felt very off. Also, we found that when it was working correctly, it made almost every encounter far too easy, but to be fair, that is often the case with this genre. If the servers could handle it, I think it'd be a really fun game to co-op, but that remains to be seen at this point. I played Nioh 1 mostly solo, but me and this same friend played pretty much all of Nioh 2 in co-op, so it's very easy to tell that something was going on with the servers here. Probably a lot of people just overloading it and trying to test it out. I have actually put in an application with Koei Tecmo to review the game early next year. They've been really good to me so far, so with any luck, I'll get to play this early and review it for you guys. If not, I'll probably just buy it anyway, which is funny because at the start, I wasn't even sure if I liked it. Thinking about it now, there may actually be another demo released for this before then, if the Nioh games are anything to go by. But regardless, I'll be sure to keep you posted. Remember to let me know if you've tried the demo yourself and also what you think about it. I'd be very interested to know how it was for some of you out there. In my opinion, after all of the struggle, I think this is a pretty good demo that literally forced me to appreciate it. I think it's got some issues here and there and I would like it to be toned down slightly, but overall, I actually like the direction it's going in. And that's a funny thing to say because during my first hour of play, I was honestly ready to quit the game and just ignore it forever. However, I pushed through, took my lashings, and now I think I'm ready for it. I mean, it looks decent, it's got great monster designs, and the gear is pretty cool to acquire. I just want them to refine the combat a little bit more and make it feel a little bit less, well, BS in certain instances, I suppose. Ultimately, the game isn't out until early 2023, so it's difficult to say how the final game will feel once I get my hands on it. The stuff I've played so far has been quite promising after the initial shock to the system, and Ninja Theory do listen to feedback. With all that in mind, I think this game could be great. I'm actually looking forward to it now, and I live in hope that the game will be polished and refined by the time it's released to the public. If you enjoy the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.